We're delighted to have the author of Amazon bestseller Head Trash, Renie Cavallari, back to our show. Aside from authoring 6 books, Renie is also a successful executive coach, accomplished speaker, and co-founder of well-known training and development company Aspire. Welcome back, Renie, and thanks for being on our show again. I've known you and Aspire for a very long time. You were co-founder of Aspire 26 years ago, and Aspire is a very different company today because of your leadership. Can you tell us some of the lessons that you learned as you grew your company?
Oh boy, where to begin? I think actually at the beginning, when I started Aspire, and it's now 27 years. Our 25th anniversary was a 2020, and so all the lessons that I thought I had learned got all discombobulated. So I'll give you some of the highlights, but I think the single greatest lesson, and actually it was a mentor who told me, build something you'll love to do. And so I looked at the various things that I did in my career to that point and said, okay, we're going to work on strategic growth, cultural alignment within organizations, and we know that leadership development is foundational to that, and then training that shifts human behavior. And that's it. We're going to stay in that zone over the years. Even though I had been a brand strategist, I'd had lots of other experiences, and I was very blessed that way that people believed in me. Because another lesson I can share is that I've never been qualified for any job I've ever had, including the one I have today. That you constantly, a lesson that my father actually taught me was that when you're stretching, when you have a learner's mindset, you'll never be bored. And even this evening, I'm going to see a speaker I know very little about, but I hear great things about, and I'm just going to, what's the one thing I can take away? And I think that's also been a really important lesson, because when you're learning, you get agile, you don't get stuck. And when you're learning, you can learn from people like when we were working with Best Western, we learned together, and you can then figure out, okay, well, what's the next best thing we can do? And how do we move from here to there? And I think that learning mindset really frees us from a lot of the rules that can quietly take over our brain.
So true. Having a learning mindset and learning to be agile. God knows there's so many things that happen along the way, just so unexpected. Well, you are in fact the CEO of the company, but why did you give yourself the title of Chief Instigation Officer?
Yes. So, yes, I am the Chief Instigator Officer. And the real reason was that Aspire's brand pillars are about literally inspiring, disrupting, and then aligning. And so what we believe is in intelligent disruption. How do we disrupt in an effective way? And I'm that instigator of really, never having grown out of the 5th grade, well, why do we do that? Or is there a better way? Or I don't understand this. And so it tends to instigate conversation. And the beauty of conversation is that when we're in dialogue together, we always end in a better place. As an organization, in my own personal relationships, that when we can dialogue, things change. But when we're in monologue, we really tend to just believe in what we know. And there's nothing that evolves from just staying stuck in what you know. So that's how I ended up being, the chief instigator, is that I just drove everyone crazy with, but why?
I actually love it. I think if you want to be successful, you got to learn to disrupt, and you're such a great listener also, and we've always had wonderful dialogues, and you learn so much when you're paying attention to the other person. I love that about you. Well, in the last show, we had a great discussion about the connected side and disconnected side of our emotional brain, and the connected side obviously gives us peace and happiness and solutions, and head trash, which really are those ugly voices that we hear all the time that inhibits our growth and brings us stress, resides in the disconnected side of the emotional brain. Now, tell us, Renie, when we do get those ugly voices, which we all get at times, telling us things like we're just not good enough or it's too hard, what can we do to dump the head trash?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. We can do things proactively, and then there's also what do we do when we're stuck? So proactively, we can do things like how do we, start our morning? We can look at our habits, because there's habits that serve us and then there's habits that don't serve us. And those habits that don't serve us generally set us up to be in the disconnected side of our emotional brain, like staying up late and watching too much TV or Netflix, and you're hooked in, and you go to sleep and it's 1 o'clock and you have a 6 a.m. call. You're not going to be at the same level of peak performance. And so what we can do proactively decreases our chances of being in the disconnected side. And we should definitely talk a little bit about morning habits today. But when we get into that disconnected side and we're just in it and we can hear the tape going, there's 3 things that we zero in on. The first is take a look at your environment. If your environment is chaotic, if your environment isn't healthy and working for you, you can change your environment. You can change it. The second is you can absolutely understand that who you hang with is who you become. So if I'm hanging with people who are positive and who are helping me solve the problem, then I'm going to have a whole different perspective. I'm going to get to the connected side of my emotional brain faster. So my solutions will be more creative. They'll be easier for me to grab a hold of. Versus if I'm hanging with someone who keeps me in the disconnected side, so they're keeping me in the problem. Why did that happen? Who did that to you? What went wrong, Renie? Like that inadvertently keeps us in the disconnected side. So we want to look at who are our mentors, who are our advisors, who do we hang with on a daily basis, and do they help us get to the connected side of our emotional brain? And sometimes we live with people who are living in the disconnected side of their emotional brain. Well, then you just have to start to that's where the boundaries and the requests come in. Whole different topic for another day. And then the most important thing that we can do is understand the model of own it, shift it, dump it. And so what we have to do first is own it. We have to own, okay, it's just head trash. I'm in the throes of it, I just start, you're collecting your trash, so to speak, and you can't let it go. But once you own it and say, okay, this is about me, because you understand that you can't control someone else. So this is just about me. Then you can start to do the shift, and the shift can be about environment, as I said, or asking for help. But the single greatest shift is looking at the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Because the questions we ask give us answers, and those answers live in our emotional brain, and they're living on one side or the other. So if I ask a question, something goes wrong, and I start asking the question, why did this happen? Who did this? What went wrong here? They're called stuck questions. I'm stuck on the disconnected side. But shift questions shift you from the disconnected side to the connected. So like one of my favorite shift questions is, who do I want to be right now? That's a good one. So, like I can remember, if you go back to a really big day in America in the last year and a half, it was January 6th. And so many things were happening in America on that day. And I remember I was in such judgment. I was in the disconnected side of my emotional brain, and I was stuck. I was like, what is going on and what's happened to America and blah, 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 blah. And nothing. And I'm watching this TV and it's sucking me in, and it's feeding the wrong side of my brain. And then I asked myself this one important question, and it was, who do I want to be right now? That's my go-to question, David, when it's hitting the fan and I'm not at my best self and every day. When that comes up, I can go to that question and it brings me over, because who do I want to be? Well, I don't want to be a person who's in judgment of others. I want to be a person who understands a different perspective. right? I want to be part of the solution. That's a whole different way to experience. It doesn't mean that I'm ignoring what's happening around me. It's just how I'm going to experience. And that shifts me into productive action. So it was decreasing that emotional stress, because who do I want to be? I now have control. And there's nothing that makes people more uncomfortable than feeling like other people are controlling them. Like that fires up, well, everybody I know, let's put it like that. So another like shift question that I love is, what's the first thing I can do here to make progress? Because can you see how that just shifts you into progress? Or my absolute favorite when I am working with someone, because when you understand shift questions for yourself, you can use shift questions with others to help shift them out. And this is where the leadership skill of own it, shift it, dump it, that model comes in. And that's, how can I help you right now?
I just love everything that you said. And this is really the crux of your book, Head Trash. And this is why I like it so much. And I've read it a couple of times now. I like your proactive approach about cultivating a positive mindset and how you start your day, the word of the day that you give yourself, and cultivating a positive environment, and all the proactive things that we can do to avoid head trash. But when we do get it, your reactive strategies are fantastic too. And I love the shift questions versus the stuck questions, because so often we just get stuck and we ask, why is this happening to me? And that's not proactive and that's not constructive at all. Whereas the shift questions, when you ask right ones, all of a sudden put you on a constructive path and you can dig yourself out. I just absolutely love that. Love that.
Thank you.
Let's shift gears and talk about the pandemic. I know it dealt a devastating blow to your company, but you developed a plan rather quickly. And that puts you, it's kind of similar to what we're just talking about, being reactive and proactive at the same time. And I really liked everything that you did. I think there were 4 main points to your strategy. Can you share what how you survived it and what you did?
Well, one of the advantages of being close to your customers, and we have about 60% of our businesses in hospitality tourism of some kind. So think back March of 2020. The only calls I was getting was, please stop all work and how can you help us survive? Like, they were the only 2 questions that I was working with people on. For Aspire specifically, and by the way, in 25 years, Dave, this was, it was March 22nd was the worst day I can think of in my career. It was the first time I'd ever laid people off in 25 years. It was my 25th anniversary. I had a book that had just come out, and we had this whole plan to celebrate our customers. We were all excited. Our business was on a trajectory of triple growth, and our foundations, I was proud and ready. And on the 22nd, it was, the reality about 4 or 5 days before, my COO and I sat down and it was like, okay, this is happening. And we need to build a resilience plan. What is our resiliency plan? And we did have 4 elements to our resiliency plan. The other thing that was really important for people to understand, that this wasn't just a bad year. This is the first year in 25 years that I lost money, and a lot of it. It was a lot of cash, my own money,
Your own money. Yeah.
My own cash to keep things afloat. And thank goodness, I'm a working class kid from Philly. I had saved my money. And I had always saved my money to always have what I feel it allows you success is freedom, right? Success to me is defined by free, what's my freedom? Well, my freedom is to be able to choose how we're going to continue to navigate. And so, of course, the first thing we did is the first strategy we implemented was, what business do we have that we can save? Because we did have business in other areas. We were diverse enough where some other businesses were able to continue work with us. And we also could look at how are we executing our business. Like we had a lot of business in senior living, and they had a sales problem because senior living was having a big struggle with COVID. And they needed, their business model doesn't work if they're not running 90% or above. So we knew, well, people are dying. They've got to, people want to get in. They've got to figure this out. And so we went into a real strategy to solve business problems for people who still had that need. So it was our revenue strategy. What do we protect and save? And what do we need to transform that we have? How do we think differently about what we have? And so we went into a total virtual model. We were up and operating in terms of training virtually on a full virtual platform by May 1. Like, it wasn't just Zoom, it was a virtual platform, interactive virtual platform. The second was, what do we need to cut? And so we just started, of course, there were jobs, which, that was the part that was terrible, because these weren't people who deserved to be cut. They wouldn't have been there. They were people that we didn't have the business, and it wasn't going to come. And so we just started looking at everything, and there was nothing too small and nothing too large. There were, our senior people took salary cuts. The COO and myself took salary cuts. No one else. We actually asked people to take a salary cut for 90 days, and then we replenished their salary. We went back the minute we got funds from the government. We made everyone whole again. We did our best to give, time for people to, recover. And we started to then say, okay, so how do we ensure productivity of those left behind? And so we started simple things like word of the day and stand-up meetings every single day. So we could do things together to decrease emotional stress, gain clarity, and ensure productive action. So our people were feeling good because in the thick of the pandemic, at least their work was bringing them a sense of productivity and contribution. And then the fourth thing that we zeroed in on was our give strategy. We've always had a give plan. We've, been donating to organizations that we believe in since the beginning of Aspire. But we really got clear on what is it that we can give to our clients, past and present. So we opened it up to even people who were not our current active clients. We did over 500 free executive coaching hours to any executive that had worked with us, past or present. And we did 86 free speeches. And the speeches kept changing. So first it was surviving, and then it moved into leading the way forward. And during that time, we also, the RCI Institute, which is another company I own, we started studying, because we always have studied how to shift human behavior. But we started studying what are certain leaders doing that are allowing them extraordinary, sustainable success over a period of 12 months. And we started watching it. So in June of 2020, we were watching it for an entire year, and we could see that there were certain pillars that when they were focused on those 6 pillars, they were able to align their organization and get the synergy and productivity they needed when they were running so lean. They were they had a perfect excuse to say this is impossible, but they didn't. So the beauty of our give strategy, which wasn't part of the strategy, is it gave us tools to really help people as we went into 2021 when we started to see burnout. This is how we help people facilitate what has to happen next. Because without great leaders, David, and you know this, organizations are defined by their culture, but culture is defined by their leaders. How do you lead? That's what defines your success as an organization.
I've known you for a long time, and I know innately you are a strategist, and no question, the strategy that you developed to survive and eventually prevail the pandemic is quite obvious. It's just fantastic. And let's talk about the courage. that it took to not only survive but prevail eventually. What gave you that courage?
Ooh, so, I think courage is kind of, it has a handful of ingredients in it, right? So a portion of the courage was my experience. I had been through the recession. I had been through difficult times. I didn't say I hadn't been through it. I mean, one year I literally made $3,000, like I called that a good year. It was a very bad year, but, so I think experience, when you are able to self-reflect and own the experiences that you've had, that is a piece of your courage, because you can draw on that knowledge, right? And say, this feels like there's no controlling the spin of what's happening with COVID, right? And that was similar to certainly during the recession. There was you couldn't control that reality. I think that's one thing. The second thing I would say is that, it was my father who said this: who you hang with is who you become. And so I have been blessed I belong to Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, which is a global organization. So they were giving learning, all kinds of Zoom learning. My forum itself, I was collaborating and thinking with people. I could also have a space to be mad, like to just let it loose. And because, my team didn't need me to be freaking out. That wasn't going to be helpful. But it wasn't like I was walking around saying, yay, COVID's going to go away. Everything's coming back. I'm not that sunshiny. It had to be, there's a sense of realism. And I think realism is another ingredient in courage, is that when you're present in the reality of something, you can gain clarity to it and you can just accept it versus being demanding that it should be some other way. Right. And then I think the last part about courage, that it's just, thank you. I think I was just, gifted this upon arrival, is tenacity, is the commitment to just never stop trying and going. And so when you have that kind of commitment, you're not worried about failing. It doesn't dawn on you. Like if something's not working, you go, oh, that didn't work. Okay. But you're not so hooked into a certain approach or a certain outcome that it has to be a certain way. And I think tenacity allows you that kind of movement, where you just keep going and going and going. And that tenacity has served me my whole life, because as I said at the beginning of this program, I haven't been qualified for any job I've ever had. But tenacity has fueled the ability to grow into the various responsibilities over time.
Yeah. Well, in our last conversation, you talked about the big lies that we tell ourselves, and we have to be introspective and recognize that. And we also briefly touched on the big lies other people tell themselves, and that it's helpful to recognize the cues. And we all work with difficult people at times, and sometimes in meetings, there are just diverse opinions about different things, and it's helpful to understand why people feel that way. So in terms of these big lies, what are the big lies again? And what are some of the cues that you can pick up in terms of why people say certain things or feel certain way?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most important things I think about Head Trash and the book and our finding is this emotional brain. And when we understand that a person is just in the disconnected side of their emotional brain, and that's why their ego is running them, or they're being blind to the reality of something, or they're angry, or they're any of those not so brilliant parts of each of us. And I live my life plenty of time, unfortunately, in the disconnected side. But when I can get my head around that for myself, and equally as important, that, oh, this person's in the disconnected side of my emotional brain. For us to make progress, all I have to do is move them to the connected side of the emotional brain. And so that's the first thing. It goes back to, like, you have to own the situation versus judging people. years ago, and you experienced the 6 pillars of intentional leadership that we Aspire had created many years ago. And the third pillar is compassion. And when we can draw on compassion for another person, when we're in the disconnected side of our emotional brain, we don't judge. You see, compassion is the lack of judging another person. And so now we can look at it and not go in and keep them stuck in the disconnected side. So that's what we can start to do, is look at what's going on for them. It's as simple as they're just in the disconnected side. So that could be anything from feeling anxiety or overwhelmment or worry or flat out fear. And so we can create the dialogue. And that's where things like, so help me understand, what's your biggest concern here? That helps a person state it. And then you can say, so what are the things we need to do so that you don't have that concern? What would make you feel better about this direction? Versus, you always say no first. Like my nature start with yes, go to no. But there's lots of people in the universe who start with no and eventually get to yes. And so I've had to learn, okay, so how do I help them get to yes? So the 4 big lies, by the way, they never change. They're the same, whether they're mine or yours. You only have one. You don't get all 4. You only have one. And from our research, that one doesn't shift. It doesn't change. And that first big lie is, I must always be right. So in the disconnected side, remember, the big lie does not live in both sides of the brain. It only lives in the disconnected side. So help a person feel right about the situation. That's how you solve that. And by the way, here's a tip. A person who talks about what's right a lot, they use the word right a lot. They tend to be when they're talking, because they'll say it doesn't feel right. The analytics don't say that. They'll be data driven. They're going to prove their point because they have to be right, and they'll use analytics. They'll use a lot of confusion because there's data coming at you because they're right, and if you're confused, then you might just give up. But instead of making them wrong, you help them. You make them right. Okay, so your data is really okay. Your data is telling us what. And they say, it's saying this, this, and this. And so where do you see the gap that needs to be closed? That's the question. Versus we start challenging the data. Well, I don't think that that's right. Well, that might be your data, but my data is, well, all we're doing is now going in to the disconnected side together. Okay. Then you have the, I must never lose. Yours truly right here. And know thyself. And so this is honestly, when a person like myself, when my big lie is on fire, I am in the, how do I not lose? And I can be so inconsiderate, and I'm not even aware of it. I'm charging forward. And so one of the things that people say around me is, so how can I help you win? What's the win look like, Renie? What do we need to do to get out of this mess, Renie? And so when we see the shift of that question, it moves us out versus, you're in your I must never, lose mode, and it's not looking good on you, would be a bad thing to say, right? So how do we help this person win? And how do we, and by the way, the I must never lose sometimes looks very collaborative because they're going around, so what do you think? And what do you think? And what do you think? And they're collecting information. But all they're doing is collecting information, because then they're going to decide how they're not going to lose, how they're going to win. And by the way, there's dead people all over the place because they charge forward, and the heck with all of you. Oops, sorry about your entire sense of self. I've moved on. And so we have to, again, being aware of it allows us to know how to self manage this, not so nice special gift. The third big lie is everyone must love me, and the everyone must love me can tend to become an enabler, because they just want everything has got to feel good all the time. It's like, it's not enough to just be comfortable. Like they got to feel the love. And so negotiations are really hard. And so if they feel a disconnect with you, and so what's important with the everybody must love me is to stay in connection. So you can say something to them that is like, I really want you to know how much I appreciate the direction you're thinking about. And I want to share my concern as it relates to the profitability of this direction. Can we explore that together? Do you see how like, if you said that to the I must never lose, they'd be like, what? Well, what are you asking the question for? Let's go. Right. Right. And so it's how we help them move to that connected side. And then lastly, I must always feel comfortable. Great lesson here. The universe gave me a daughter who's an I must always feel comfortable, a husband who's an I must. I got them everywhere. They're like, it's, the universe's joke on me. And this is where you have to allow people space to feel comfortable. So imagine you're the I must, never lose, and you're charging forward and you don't understand why other people aren't moving as quickly as you. Well, if you're an I must be comfortable, you're not comfortable yet. And so you've got to really respect, how do I give people space to feel comfortable with this direction? Or ask the question, so what would make you feel comfortable moving forward? That changes everything. But what would make you feel comfortable moving forward? If you said that to an I must be right, they'd be like, I don't give a hoot about comfort. You're wrong. So these big lies, we teach really how to utilize these big lies and work with them in our coaching series in level 2 coaching. It's really a higher level of coaching and leadership than foundational because of the dynamics. And the final thing I'll say about the big lies is don't tell someone else their big lie ever, and don't bring it up when they're in the disconnected side of their emotional brain. Telling me I'm in my I must never lose is not going to make me go, oh, thank you for reminding me. Not going to work.
Great advice. I love it. You've been a executive coach for a very long time, and in fact, a very respected and sought after executive coach. I know you're very selective about your clients because you just can't take on too many more. Now, tell us, would you feel comfortable sharing with us some of the challenges and struggles some of your clients might have faced and how you help them?
Oh, well, I think I could even, speak to those challenges and struggles because I have the same ones. I think that's, there's a lot going on out there. So right now, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is burnout of our leaders and burnout of the people that report to them, because we had to do so much with so little, and it became a habitual use of our adrenaline. And so adrenaline is made for fight and flight, but human beings are not made to stay in fight and flight. And so this is the result of burnout. And then people, resigned. So we had the great resignation, but they didn't deal with their head trash. They didn't deal with what was actually burning them out. They just shifted jobs. So now we have another, people are leaving again, and it's because they didn't deal with what was really going on for them. And so right now, actually, the RCI Institute, we've just finished a study called The Great Reset. And it's about how to reset your organization and how to reset your own mindset. So because we got the habit of it. So burnout is a huge challenge that we're experiencing. Then the other is we have gotten so busy that some of the things that are most important. So spending time thinking. I had a boss who once said to me, and it wasn't a compliment, I might frame this. We had done something, my team had done something, and we were very successful. And I was standing around waiting for him to say, thank you, Renie, well done. You and your team did a great job. And it wasn't what he said. He said, Renie, I pay you to think. The fact that you were thinking just means you're doing your job. Now, he wasn't the most inspiring boss, but what that said to me was really important. And so right now, one of the things that when we're busy, we don't think and prepare, we just move. And our industry, hospitality in general, we're movers because we react a lot because of the nature of the business. And so when we take time to think and prepare, we have less issues around redundancy. We can decrease errors. These types of costs are also annoyances emotionally. I have somebody who works for me, and they're going through a really difficult time in their life right now. It's a difficult time. And so they're making mistakes. They're making errors. It costs money. So I like telling them, hey, you got to leave that at home. That's not going to help them. Like, no kidding. They feel terrible. Like, you'd think they don't know. They already know they're making mistakes. It's okay. So what process can we put in place to help you slow it down so that we can feel that, we can eliminate these and you can feel better? That's how we can deal with, the realities that people are going through. And then, I think, so how we onboard people, how we solve our business problems, doing more coaching versus less, like finding the time for what matters most. And that's what I ask myself every day. What matters most today? Like, what is it that I really, can impact in the most effective way? And when I take time to think about it, I'm always better. Just hanging out with you today. I mean, I wrote a book on this stuff. I shouldn't need to prepare, like it was published, but I still take the time to think about, so what is it that's most important that can help people? And when you don't do that, in my experience, it raises my emotional stress. Then I don't have clarity. Then I can't be productive with others. So when I think understanding also, David, that high stress level that we have, that as leaders and influencers, it goes out to everyone. And so when I can do things and have experiences in my life, habits in my life that decrease my emotional stress, now I'm going to set a different environment for everybody around me. But when I'm going nuts, the tempo will pick up. And, whatever that's saying, the beatings will occur until everyone's happy, or whatever the heck that is. And it doesn't work that way. I think one of the biggest things with working with C-level team members is to help them really identify and what is the real core problem, and how can you think about various solutions, and then because they know how to move, they know how to get things done. That's why they're there. But not having the time or someone to be a peer to challenge them in, like, well, you say you want this, but this is what we're doing. So how are you going to get that? Because it's more of the same. Like, this won't work. It's not like it's, oh my gosh, Renie, that was brilliant. It's just someone to think with, to go, oh God, why am I doing that?
Such great advice. I really appreciate it. Before we go, would you like to share with the audience any significance for the hat that you're wearing today?
Well, to me, kindness is really at the core. When you're in the shift human behavior business, which is what Aspire does, we help people improve their performance. I mean, that's it. But you're asking people to do something out of their comfort zone. And I think that kindness, when we move from kindness, whether I'm in the grocery store, this hat is such a engager, because I'll go to the grocery store and people will be like, amen. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. But to me, when we can spread kindness and move from kindness, it's the gift that gives back. It's like gratitude. When I'm in gratitude, I'm in a great space. And when I'm feeling like I've been ripped off, blah, 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 I'm not in a great space. And so, it's putting these things out in front of us so that we can shift into them and own them in our life.
I totally agree with you. During the pandemic, I always remind myself of three things. One is be safe, obviously, and be healthy. And the third one is be kind, because there's so much suffering all around us. And being kind actually gives you gratification and peace and joy. I really like what you just said. And now with the Great Reset, we also need to be kind.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Renie, thank you so much. Again, very much appreciate your time for being on the show and for preparing for the show. I didn't know you needed any kind of preparation. But thank
Always.
you again for doing that. I really appreciate it. I think that the audience would find great benefit from your words of wisdom. And thank you to our audience for tuning in as well. Thanks again, Renie. Take good care.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, David.
Bye.